Dave, you want to kick us off here?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for joining. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think everybody has talked through at some point or another, but this whole AI and ITSM, what it means, the different approaches, all of that. So I'll kick it off just with a friendly reminder of who we are, a little bit about our background and our experience with the various approaches to AI in IT service management. And really, we'll go through this agenda today, and then we could talk a little bit towards the end about some practical ways to use us if there's something in there that you want to dig into a little bit deeper. We are going to monitor the chat, the Q&A there, so feel free to throw anything in there. We can also follow up with any other one-on-one sessions as needed. So the last piece is this is recorded, so we'll be able to send this out to anyone that wasn't able to attend today. All right, so a little bit about who we are. We've actually, weirdly enough, have known each other for for quite a long time now. I met Mark Curley at Shark Camp in October of 2012, I think, or November of 2012 at
No?
ServiceNow. So we've been working together for a number of years in the service management space. I'll do their intros just because you'll learn a lot more about them as they start talking. But just a little bit of background on me. I've been doing IT service management, both from a product side and from a solutions or services solution side, really have seen its ability to transform organizations when done correctly. Also have seen it done incorrectly and seen some of the roadblocks and the frustration that goes into a poor service management implementation and experience. So that's a little bit about me. Mark Curley, he's been doing service management for a little bit longer than I have. So Mark, I don't know if you want to tell him a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll pass it over to Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. There. Yeah, I've been in service management for quite some time. Been in technology all the way back since the 1900s, I would say, which is a feat these days. But my kind of life inspiration here, what I'm passionate about, is really sitting between technology that's coming out and how to, effectively apply that for people. And so even through college and all my career since then is really kind of walking that line between helping translate, what's out there in the wild of the technology field and how we can apply that for businesses. And been doing that for the last, I don't know, 15, 16 or so years here. And I'm especially reason I'm kind of driving today is especially in tune and passionate's a strong word here, but I guess it's true. I am really passionate about the AI that's coming out, that's been out, I would say, for as you'll see, we'll do a bit of history lesson, been out for a while. But as of recent, it's really hit the forefront, and I've spent a lot of time working with go-to-market teams and new product ideations and getting different capabilities out there into the market and just really wanted to spend, the next hour or so here trying to distill some of that for everyone and just kind of cutting, as we say, cutting through the noise. So I'm happy to be here and I'll hand it over to Paul.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, hi everyone. I've also been in the service management space for quite some time. I have a background in IT prior to that, and really my role and what I do here at Flight Crew is working with Mark on the strategy side, but for the implementations and really where the rubber meets the road on the tooling aspect with service management. So leveraging Jira Service Management when it comes to the different AI capabilities, and also looking at it from business process improvements and that perspective, leading workshops with our customers on everything that's possible on the JSM platform, how it ties to the existing business processes and working through that for the actual implementations and setup of the tool. So happy to be here. And Mark, thank you. Turn it back to you.
Yeah, I think the thing that brings us all together is we really want to, or I think the common theme is we enjoy demystifying technology for customers, both in the evaluation phase, so as folks are looking to bring on new capabilities or new tools, but also really maximizing what they have today. We see a lot of platforms that are either underutilized or just configured incorrectly or just without a lot of thought into what the actual outcome is supposed to be. So that's what brings us all together, and we're going to dive into a little bit more about what that means in the context of AI. So thank you very much for joining. We'll get started.
Awesome. And just to let you know what we're going to go through here, because it's going to be a somewhat of a journey. Again, feel free to ask questions, raise the hand or the virtual hand here if you can, or hit the chat Q&A. But I wanted to start with the what is AI. It's going to be a little bit of a history lesson where I put on my historian hat through the lens of how I've seen it and how that applies to service management. So I think that's important that we're going to set the foundation. It's a lot of, like we were mentioning, cutting through the noise, if you will. Then we're going to get into JSM specific capabilities, as well as some use cases using those capabilities, and then some considerations for deploying this technology out in your environment. So first off, little tongue in cheek here, but I came across this quote. I don't know, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Don't need to read it to you, but feel free to read it there. And it's something that I've seen. I'd say in general, the point here is we're maybe now coming down the cusp of a hype cycle, but there's been so much hype around artificial intelligence as of late and things that it could potentially do. There's been all kinds of businesses coming out into the market with products that either are legitimate, AI type solutions, or they're wrappers. You'll probably hear that term a lot. They're just wrapping up another solution or another AI technology and putting a use case to it. So we've seen situations where customers or organizations have made somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction, like in the example here. I fired my entire staff. When can it start diagnosing medical disorders? Getting a little bit too excited about it. And so while we are excited about it, we want to make something very clear here, right? AI is a automation tool, and that's the way to think about it these days. There is an evolution that we're going to speak to here in a minute, but the fact is, it's not the solution for every problem. It's not like an all-knowing type of technology, right? However, it is fantastic at improving, your current service management practices, right? And it should be leveraged in your existing processes and then used to, continually improve those over time. And the way I think about AI and the way to help kind of frame it in your mind is it's very much like a student, right? We'll call it an attentive student. And that student, this system learns from data, right? And the better the data, the better it learns, right? And the better they perform. And they learn as they go. So it's very much an iterative session here. So all in all, the intent is really to just ground us out into reality here, figure out, what are the value hits with AI within service management, what are the things to look out for in service management, and how can we best apply those, right? And the way I think about it is AI is an automation, but it's automation with intelligence. So we use it primarily to improve kind of efficiency gains, productivity gains, and experience that we'll get into. So little bit of the history lesson here, and I don't intend for you to have to read through this, and I promise I won't bore you too much, but the idea is, all the way back in the 1950s, this technology has started, right? These artificial intelligence. We've gone and we had like you've probably heard all my sci-fi friends of Turing, right? The Turing test. The real breakthrough here was with those expert systems and the Lisp language and perceptron. That's when essentially the early neural nets were coming out into play. Then we get into this, the 90s to kind of the early 2000s, mid 2000s. This is when deep learning has become practical. There's a generative adversarial network that was developed during this time, which allows us to create things, kind of the early beginnings of LLMs of these days. And then we move into what we're all really familiar with right now, I think, and we're all like the hype is currently with these large language models. It came with the advent of a transformer technology, the GPTs that we've seen out here. You've probably heard of generative AI, which is, creating things, right? We're creating, writing, reasoning, having conversation. It's a nice way to interact with a system. And then the most recent today is the agentic AI, right? Where these agents can actually go out, take information, make plans and decisions on that information, and then actually go execute against those plans. So looking forward, and this isn't the intent of this webinar necessarily, but there is there is reasons to look forward in time here and kind of predict and try to set your businesses up and your organizations up successfully. But we're gonna probably in the next 5 years or so starting to see true adaptive AI coming out, more autonomous agents. Agents right now are probably closer to an assistant. An autonomous agent would be more like a coworker, if you will, getting out to the general intelligence and then super intelligence, and then in the sci-fi realms, which I got to say I think is coming up in the next couple decades here, is kind of like a digital consciousness aspect here, which is going to be interesting from a like a governance and regulation perspective. Putting this in the lens of service management here, right? And this is where the idea is the technology has been around for a long time. The technologies in general have been around for a long time. It's all about using them to automate and where can we, improve. And what's happening today, as I fast forward past what you're seeing here in the 50s, we're really moving from like a experimentation kind of theoretical sort of situation into a production enterprise, right? Where it's actually embedded into your core kind of service operations here. It's a role shift. And what we've started is originally here in the foundation era, we were able to make predictions, have the rule-based automations. This is when AI could recognize patterns, start recognizing images, things like that. Get into the 90s to the 2020s here, or 2019. We've developed a way for it to, see and hear, if you will. We've got language that was incorporated there with the LLMs, essentially taking almost the entirety of human language and tokenizing it and making it so that a system can understand it, which is a fantastic way for us to interact with systems since we, use language consistently. AI could start strategizing at this point. Then it came into this generative area, which I think we're all very familiar with, about creating things, right? So they can create text, images, code, videos. Now we're living in what I am coining, and this is all me coining these terms. I don't know if you'll pop a history book and see any of these, but if I become a famous historian, here we are. In the enterprise era, right? So this is now we're moving from like that experimentation to like the operational, core service, where the AI can now take action, right? Make the plans, make the decisions, start doing things. So we've kind of gone from through the evolution now where we are is AI can, recognize, it can understand, it can create, it can act. Now there's limitations to that for sure. And we're done talking about the future of it. This is just kind of where we're sitting today, to keep it practical, no hype. One thing I did want to call out over here is this lessons in this hype cycle. There were these periods of time that were called AI winters, that you may or may not have heard of. Happened in, I think, the 70s and then again in the late 80s. And these were periods of time where there was so much hype around AI that it can become, a human essentially with human level intelligence. And then people saw what the reality was, and then the businesses and the government and the investment and research and all that kind of backed away. That's happened twice, right? With throughout these big eras of decades here that we're talking to. I think we're at the top of a hype cycle now. So if you think of it kind of like the stock market or any kind of cycle, pattern, we're coming out with all the hype. Businesses now are trying to figure out how to effectively and practically consume this technology and use it to their advantage and use it to differentiate. And they're starting to become aware of what it actually does versus like that kind of funny joke at the beginning, right? The talking dog kind of thing. It's not going to go do everything for you, but it can do some good things. One thing I wanted to point out here is a future thought that I had, which I think is relevant for us in the service management space. So from a very much a vendor perspective right now, these technologies, we're invested in heavily. They're not cheap. They're expensive. The reason it's become popular or more mass produced, if you will, in the generative era is because with things like the GPU and the LLM technologies that we have, it's become more affordable. So it's gone from theory to practicality, and we're starting to see them, right? The companies have all invested largely into these technologies and they're rolling them out into the market, as we speak. And the way they're pricing it is typically around like seat level pricing, where you're paying for a person that uses it. I think what's going to happen now, because this advent of the enterprise era and this agentic AI that we've got going on, that seat growth is going to slow, right? And in the next 1 or 2 years, you're seeing AI in the market getting bundled into solutions. And I think it's going to start becoming like an AI first type of SKUs that you're going to see. And the consumption pricing is going to start gaining traction, which means in the next 2 to 3 years, I see this pricing model going away from, because, as corporations will, they need to monetize what they're putting out there. They're going to move away from this like per seat model and start getting into more of like outcome-based pricing. They're going to get into like process-based pricing or like consumption-based pricing. And that's important just to think about, because 2 to 5 years isn't really that far down the road here. And when we make investments, we're usually on a horizon of just about that. And so from our perspective as a partner with Atlassian here, we're thinking that, for us, it's going to move some of our work that we provide from maybe less of like a role training type of aspect to more of like a workflow redesign and teaching organizations and people how to work with AI. I think from your perspectives, using AI and us too, as we use it, we need to understand that it's important for us to really know what our processes are doing to be able to start mapping out those processes, like with these technologies, like with the Jira and the JSMs of the world and the work management, so that we can really understand what these outcomes are. Because if we're going to have vendors starting to charge us based on outcomes or based on transactions or based on processes affected, like payroll runs, hires processed, expense reports ran, those kinds of things. We need to know what we're doing with that, right? Like the information around that, like what are we actually leveraging in our organization? How important is it? What kind of value could we extract from it? And that way, when we start getting, priced based on that, we have the tools to be able to negotiate and understand where our value is. Now, where I see us today is AI is evolving from being a tool, the automation, like I mentioned, to an assistant, to a colleague, to eventually a strategist that's going to help, make decisions and actually be more insightful and more predictive, if you will, on business moves, right? We're today, I think, just between it becoming a tool to becoming an assistant. And what I mean is a lot of companies are, having the agentic AI run out there, and it's working, but I want to, and we'll set this expectation here. It's not something that can go out and do anything. It's not something that I would unleash without monitoring it yet. It's still a type of technology where it's doing good, but it's doing good, and I'm making this up, but say 80% of the time, right? The 80/20 rule. There's other times when it makes mistakes, it doesn't have the data it needs, there's some sort of error in play. So it's not like a fully autonomous assistant at this point. We're kind of straddling that right now. And I think that's going to be a quick transition. It's starting to happen as we speak. And probably within the next year or two, it will become trusted and fully autonomous. Just going to take a pause here because I covered a lot. I'm going to move away from like the history. Wanted to give that just to kind of set the foundation of what this technology is and where it came from and how we are about to start showing how to use it. Are there any questions, comments? Does anyone raise their hands?
No questions as of yet, but I do know, the history of this. It contributes a lot to, there's so many AI companies out there, right? Everybody's doing AI. So, what we're going to get into here is really what's the practical use case? Why does Jira Service Management make it so easy, and having it tied to service management be such a great place to start in an AI journey. It's every company, oh, well, we want to do AI. How do you do that? And it's really getting it into, um, the practicality of applying it to something like service management.
And that's a good, actually a nice segue, Paul. Thank you. So, why do we care? As service management experts here, why does this matter, right? And I think there's some external factors, internal factors in the organizations and like the way society is going as well. But to kind of bucket it out into three big areas here, we've got a rising complexity of technology. There's more sophistication in our world and our environments. There's more of a need for us to collaborate and communicate across these various departments and organizations. The days of companies working in like independent silos are over. Companies just can't thrive anymore with that. Data has become the currency, right? And there's more and more data to be had these days with all these systems. So it's just the rising complexity, and that's something that can help, or that AI can help with. The other side of this is the employees themselves, and call them also like the consumers as well. For your consumers and for your employees and all your stakeholders, they have high expectations on the levels of service that they want to gain, and they see a lot of really great services that are occurring in their personal lives, perhaps. And they don't understand, and they would expect that that should happen at the same within an organization. So you've got this push from a technology getting more complex and from the organizations getting more complex. You've got this push from the employees, societies, consumers expecting higher levels of service and faster responses and more personalized experiences. All of that is combined with, as we know, the cost pressures, right? And the fact that we need to keep quality up. So it's like we got to reduce service cost while increasing service quality, and reduce the amount of errors. And we want to minimize or fully eliminate downtimes and things like that. So all these kind of three big factors here, where there's all kinds of KPIs and things to get into, are really why this technology matters, because AI can help with all of this, right? It's all about the productivity, the efficiency, and the cost savings. And that's what to talk to right now is, what are the good things about AI? And I'm going through this intentionally here. Hopefully it's not just like totally redundant for everyone, but when you're going and campaigning or making business cases internally and decisions on technologies and why you want to bring them in, these are points that resonate with the boards. They resonate with the executives. They're top of mind, right? That I've seen in the marketplace here. And so it's the way to kind of organize your business case around, these are the benefits that we could potentially see if we go and start utilizing these technologies in a very purposeful way, right? In a way that you're not just buying the talking dog or the dog that looks like it talks, but you actually understand, what this can do and how it can help you. So to talk through these real quickly, efficiency and productivity, I think, is a no-brainer here. It's definitely about automating manual tasks. The decision making is around the pattern recognitions, all the data that we have available to us these days, getting those predictive insights. I have a great term I like to throw around, which is data should not be a lazy asset. So it's like, if you have the data and you have all this kind of like operational data at your fingertips, you might as well leverage it, right? And make use of it. Then you got, of course, with AI, the improved experience, because it can definitely personalize. It can understand sentiment of people, if they're having a good or say bad experience, or what their attitude is coming in, and allow you to, respond accordingly. And it can help facilitate a much quicker resolution, or perhaps even a resolution that doesn't, require anything but the system to resolve it for you. And then a lot of it's also used to ideate, right? With the innovation, like, how can I improve this process? You can ask some of these foundational models for suggestions or ideas, or run by it. You've probably done this, an email or a paper or statements or whatever, and give you suggestions on changes and things. which is always helpful to how to improve in a process, or here's the data we see, how would you suggest improving it, or what are the four main areas that we should go and look at and consider. And then, of course, cost savings, right? I think all of this from a corporate perspective comes down to cost savings. And that's the way to frame a business case, is you've got your value, kind of your soft costs, your hard costs, and then present that out to say, here's why we think this is going to have a large return or why it's worth, the spend on it. The things to watch out for, I purposely didn't want to call them cons, because I originally was doing like pros and cons here, if you can't tell. But really, it's, what are the values? What are things to just be considerate of? And this isn't something I wanted to broaden this out a bit. I didn't make this like necessarily service management specific. It's more of in this world of AI, you've got this build versus buy. You can create your own models, you can manage your own solutions. You can also go and purchase ones that are pre-built, like in JSM with Rovo and Atlassian Intelligence, right? Now, the reason I'm bringing these up are when you go to make a case, like say to your executives or to the leadership, these are the things that they're concerned about, or damn well should be concerned about when they're looking at these types of technologies, right? And one thing they're hearing at, like, I'll call it the board level is, there's high implementation costs. Like this thing is just ridiculously expensive. And I think a lot of that gets caught up into the what I'm putting down as build versus buy. But when you're hosting these technologies, like the amount of storage for the data, there's vector databases, if you've heard those terms around, where you copy the data over, and doing that can be cost prohibitive. The actual compute that pushes these models is intense. So, there's a lot of cost potentially. And then there's also like the fear of when you're building things, we have to maintain it, right? And we have to train it, and we have to have administrators and new kinds of specialists and new kinds of roles that we never had before. So all of that is inclusive of these like total cost of ownership of bringing these technologies into your environment. The other thing they're concerned about is AI sprawl. So there's so many tools out there, and especially in the build world, where you just have a bunch of overlapping capabilities. You're concerned that you won't be able to track it, etc. Right? So I'm kind of coining that. If you're all familiar with the old cloud sprawl stuff, it's going to be a similar situation that these leaders are concerned about is AI sprawl. And the reason, again, I'm bringing this up is because when you go and make a business case, or you're trying to campaign internally to bring in some of these cool technologies, which are well worth it, just be aware that these are some of the concerns they have. And I know, and we can address these as well, right? Like with Atlassian as an example, we get around a lot of these because Atlassian's hosting it. It's all pre-built, it's use case built, it's purposeful. So a lot of these aren't non-issues, but it's important to be able to convey that to those that are worried about it. And the other one here is your trust in the system, right? Trust in the machine. These models can what they call hallucinate, which is just respond completely grossly inaccurately. So you don't want it to be making decisions or telling you to go do something, or these are the steps to follow if it's inaccurate. And a lot of this is around people trying to build their own models too, or using data that is not appropriate. So it's like, bad in, bad out kind of thing. And then there's also concerns about like the ethical considerations and bias and stuff like that of how you train these models. Like if you're using a chat GPT that was trained on Reddit, it's going to respond differently than a model that was trained off of like business transactions, right? The same thing around privacy is a big deal. And again, these are like the concerns, where's our data going? Are there controls in place? Like this is our IP at this point. Data truly is becoming the currency of the world here now. And not only like personal information, but your corporate IP. And so there again, not to plug too hard here, but Atlassian does a great job of guardrailing that, not spreading the data around, advertising very publicly how they're architected and structured so that you can have comfort, knowing your data is not being used to train models and things like that. Another concern that I've seen, and I call this at like the board level here, because these are kind of like the high level concerns, is around the over reliance on technology, where, you get this situation where something breaks and no one knows how to fix it, right? Because they're so reliant on like the Wall-E syndrome, right? Being able to use these techs. So I don't think that's the case by any stretch, but these are concerns, and part of this ties into the high implementation about like what kind of roles you might need or what kind of expertise or training you might need.
So there was a question from the chat on the typical roadblocks we see for AI adoption in the enterprise. I would characterize it at a high level as just misunderstanding what the use case is and what the technology being used is. And then it all flows down from there. But that would be my little view of the world. When I see things go wrong, it's usually something was in that hype cycle and um the downstream effects no one really fully understood how to do correctly. So, Mark, I'll turn it over to you to give you give the actual answer, but it does seem like it came from a misunderstanding of what they were trying to do and then how much it would cost.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, there's the other sides of it because I've seen this too. AI gets out there, can, write code and do things great like that from a developer perspective. You give it to like your best developer and they're not using it, right? Because they know the information or they know their job, let's put it that way. So they're not adopting it for some reason. I think there's a couple considerations there. One is, and we'll get into this when we do some recommendations for deployment, there needs to be real effort put around into communicating what these capabilities are that you're putting into their world and why they're beneficial to them so that it's not like a scary thing, which leads me to the other point. A lot of people, I think, have a animosity towards AI, thinking that it's going to replace their job, perhaps. I position it as, it's not about replacing the people, really. It's about like amplifying them, if you will, so that they can use these and do more with it, not necessarily getting rid of people. But the fact is, companies are using this to eliminate jobs. So there is a concern around that you need to address, right? And these are things that I get into when we're going to talk about some of the deployment stuff. But yeah, there's an interesting way too to help frame your thoughts around that. So we deployed AI out internally in my company, and we found that there was kind of three like types of employees. I'll say it nicely. Uh, the first type was they do a bad job no matter what. Like they're not good at what they do, they're just not good performers. Let's put it that way. We rolled AI out there and they managed to stay not good performers. Then there was a middle tier, which I'll get into. The above tier was what I would consider like your super high performers. The super high performers that we rolled these AI solutions out to also didn't really use the tools. They did a little bit, but again, they were kind of naturally high performers. They knew their job. They were running out successfully. Then there was this like middle band of employees that we had that were good employees. They could perform, but they weren't high performers. They were maybe learning. Those were the ones that from a usage adoption perspective that used it the most and quite a bit, to be honest. They were the ones that still recognized that they needed to learn, new skills, or they needed to ask questions or get help with what they were doing, and they had that ambition to go do that and try to be like a high performer and try to do better. That was the band of employee kind of dimension where we saw the most usage of these AI technologies. So I'm bringing this up because that was a real world example that I'm giving you there of what we saw. And I think it's important to think of it that way. Your audiences aren't going to be using it all the same, right? So it's kind of if you're going to target your employees that want to do good at their job, they're junior level employees perhaps, or junior to that role anyway. They have some ramping to do. They want to do well. They're going to be from what I've seen, they're going to be your heavy users, your heavy adopters. If you have employees that just aren't going to perform regardless. Like they're not going to really adopt these technologies. If you have employees that think they know everything, and perhaps they do, they're at the top of their game. They're not, ramping up or learning. They're going to probably use it less. And so it's more of around that middle tier. Now that being said, A ton of this adoption that I see in the service management space is around your like self-service, your employees or your consumers, and they will use it not because they're looking for how to do something in their job per se, but because they're asking for something or they have an issue with something. And behind the scenes, the system is just responding to them and giving them answers. And so I think the adoption would be, forcefully high on that one because they're going to be using it regardless, right, with the systems. And I hope that helped answer your question there, give you some insight. The the JSM side of the house here. So I'm going to start getting real specifically into JSM capabilities now. We've been kind of overarchingly talking about service management, giving the history of AI in general, and then kind of scoping it down to why, we care in our world. Now in JSM, they've got a great way of deploying this technology here, right? So they've got this Atlassian Intelligence and Rovo, which is the agentic AI components here. And what you're seeing is just a graph of JSM and how it works within an enterprise or within a company here. I've taken the liberty of going through and digesting what capabilities are specific to JSM here. So I'm not going to be talking about other Atlassian AI, which there is plenty thereof. This is specific for Jira Service Management. And I took the liberty of breaking it out into kind of four big buckets here. The way I think about Jira Service Management is it's not like a feature, right? It's more of a toolbox. And you want to adopt these, speaking of like adoption and usage, you want to adopt these capabilities, I think, incrementally, right? And it depends really on your maturity of your org and also the business need, right? And I'm going to emphasize this repeatedly. You want to put these technologies out there for a specific reason, right? To accomplish a certain goal. And so you want to have a business need or an outcome that you're shooting for. And then you pick the appropriate capabilities to leverage to support those needs. So these four categories here, we've got self-service, and this is me, right? So just bear with me on this here. You could probably categorize it differently in things, and these capabilities are used in different areas as well. But as I kind of digested it into these four, you've got self-service and virtual agent. This is all around like deflection, your KB, your knowledge article suggestions, having like multi-language support, which is I didn't list, but I think is relevant for some people, having the AI answer actual questions instead of just like presenting out information. Then we get into things around ticket management, right? And like your agent assistance, as I would call it. This is where it's helping agents triage or the system's doing the pre-triage for them. There's summarization involved. The smart mentions, which is for those that don't know, smart mentions are the ability to have the system suggest who should be included in this event or this ticket, like who are the stakeholders, and then what steps should perhaps be taken to resolve or respond to that. Then I get into incident management, AI ops. This would be, in conjunction with things like Ops Genie as well that you might be using for alert. But this is around alert grouping. The agentic AI, I think, plays into a component here specifically, which I'll get into around post-incident review drafting, the root cause analysis. It can create incidents based off of multiple issues occurring and identify that as being like one kind of major type of incident, helping assess, risks and that kind of thing, and also making suggestions on what to do. And then finally, within the knowledge management space here, which I think is often overlooked, honestly, one thing I would push just in general is knowledge is so powerful, especially now that we have a way to curate it with the system here that it helps support your all your other processes almost. And the capabilities I'm calling out here are the gap detection. So what new topics should we create within articles? When you find those new topics or you create one yourself, like actually drafting that article based on what's occurred previously, and then recommending articles to like agents or people requesting on things that might help them out and do stuff. There's an important note here, this is by no stretch like all the capabilities that are sitting within like the AI realm in Jira Service Management, but just ones that I wanted to highlight. I'm putting out a paper here in the next week that I'm going to do a similar exercise of categorizing all the capabilities so that you can see them. And some of them, like I haven't mentioned here, but I think are worth note, are like your setup and configuration. So like when you're creating new projects or new automations or new request types or new templates, you can all do that with the natural language now, which is pretty cool. It makes it much quicker to effectively make changes and improvements to your procedures and stuff. So I'm gonna get into each of those and show just like a super quick recorded demo of what that looks like in Jira Service Management here. So the first one is around, again, the virtual agent, which I think we're all familiar with, right? This is the conversational tier. That with the advent of the large language models and the technology now with Rovo, this is like a game changer. You no longer have to, I don't know if any of you lived through this horror. I know the three of us hosting this did, through natural language processing, where you have to essentially train a tool how to talk or whatnot. That's all kind of commoditized now and just table stakes. So when you interact with the system, it's already got like the conversational components done, right? The AI answers are the ability to actually say, hey, I've got these knowledge articles out there. This person's asking this question. Here's the actual answer, right? Period. And then the article suggestions is around more of a machine learning type of technology, which is also AI, right? But that says when you're searching for something or when an agent is pulling up an issue or a request of some sort, it says, hey, these are probably the articles that may be relevant to what you're doing. So in this like quick video here, what's going on is we've got a portal, right, that we popped up and we're getting into Rovo for help. And one thing to call out here that I like about JSM is all of this is multi-channel, if you will. So if you wanted to do this through like a phone tree, or if it was coming in from email, or if it was something that you're using Slack or Teams for, you could have a similar experience, right, with the AI responding. In this case, what happened here is we can't log into a VPN. You can see that the after the person said I can't log into VPN, I'm just kind of flipping through this here. The AI gave them a actual response. This is what I think you need to do for that. And then at the end of that response here, it pops out and says, after responding to your specific question or whatnot, here's the sources of information I got that from, which is important for some users, right? Especially if they're trying to validate like where is this, or I want to get some more steps, or I need more detail, perhaps like click here for more detail type of experience. And then it also gives them a back out or an exit strategy where if it didn't answer their question or did something incorrectly, or for whatever reason, they need to move on, you allow them to immediately then go to the next step and like talk to a person or submit an issue at that point.
Yeah, the goal is really to get the user help. So I know we've all seen on the panel here, chatbots and other technologies that suggest something that could be just blatantly wrong or not relevant at all, and you say like, no, that didn't help, and it's like, well, what about this? And then there's 10 more articles, and it just keeps suggesting that I'm not going to use this. So instead, what this is doing is, hey, here's what I feel is going to be relevant to your question. And then if that wasn't helpful, no, okay, let me connect you to an agent. Let me get you a human, or you have control over how you want that guided experience to work. But at the end of the day, it's all about making it easier for the users, improving the user experience. And I think an important call out for Atlassian's virtual service agent is it's also not just throwing links over the fence of try these knowledge articles. It's pulling the relevant content. And what's key, even in this example, if there was a lengthy knowledge document that was out there, this can pull just the relevant section to present back to you. So it's really tailoring the user experience for how do I answer that specific question that you had based on all this knowledge that it has access to.
And thanks, Paul. The next one is around ticket management, that ticket management quadrant that I was categorizing things into here. What's happening on this one is, this is identifying what the ticket ask is, essentially. It's letting the agent know, here that the individual should have access based on the person's role who requested it. It just asks the agent there, would you like to escalate the priority or change the priority on this because the system has recognized that either maybe that person's a VIP of some sort or there's similar requests of the same nature that were a high priority. Then it's giving them guidance on how to go ahead and take steps to finish that action and complete it, or if it were like a troubleshooting scenario, how to troubleshoot it. And then what you're seeing here is it actually creates content on what to draft out as a reply to the requester. And it's important here. I consider this technology to be semi-automatic in the sense that you want it to generate the comment, but then you want to give the person, the agent in this case, a chance to take a look at it and make any changes. While they're doing that, the system can actually help them make changes. Like what's being highlighted here is the multilingual aspect. If they wanted to switch the language on it, or if they wanted to set a different tone, or just add more notes and then make the grammar correct. All those capabilities are sitting here when they're drafting it. So really this like ticket management stuff is all around accelerating the resolution speeds and reducing like your manual effort that you see around these service teams, right? Just to make them faster and make their jobs easier.
Yeah, instead of having to try to figure out, oh, have we dealt with this issue before? Perhaps if there's not a SOP document that's out there or a knowledge article of how this was handled in the past, a technician or an agent would typically have to look through, well, let me search based on keyword in my list of closed tickets. Have we dealt with this before? This is really doing all of that legwork for you of, hey, this is based on what we've seen that's similar to this. That suggestion on the right-hand side is all about, here's how you could attempt to fix this. So it can use knowledge articles that are out there, but it can also use everything in the ticket. So it's really just putting to the forefront anything that may be relevant and useful to help resolve this issue even faster. And then one other aspect here is also from, if you're a new agent or it got escalated to your team on level 1 or 2, now it's at the next level. I'm taking over this ticket. I don't have to read through 30 to 40 comments that might be in the ticket. I can actually just click the summarize the comment button and, again, have the AI recommend, oh, this is everything you need to know that's important, as opposed to taking all that time to read through and just try to get caught up so that you could start working on the task.
And then our next quadrant here is around more of incident management. To me, there's a difference between like tickets, which could be kind of any kind of service center, versus like an incident that something's actually broken in this case, like usually an IT incident or maybe a security incident. This is all around, reducing MTTR, ensuring that you have consistent documentation for like audit logs and things like that. And then, reducing the noise on like what's actually important and what should we be working on. You'll see this a lot in like NOCs or operations centers where they're having a bunch of systems provide them telemetry and alerts and things like that. And it's like, what do we actually need to do? In this example, what we're showing is through the Rovo agent here, say it's helped triage issues, it's helped already identify who, maybe the stakeholder should be. It's already consolidated alerts into maybe from like OpsGenie or something into a single actionable record that you can then relate to the other incidents. At this point, it's creating a post-incident review. And I can't underemphasize that one enough, having lived through this in my previous life, but that's like an act that's super important to get things around. Let's not have this happen again. When you're presenting out to the stakeholders or executives, this is what occurred. This is why the downtime happened. Here's what we did. It pulls together, the change information, the cause information, the related incidents, the impact, the history of the issue that's occurred, all into one report here. And then again, the semi-automatic nature of things is I wouldn't just have the system do this and then go publish it out, to your executives. It's more of let's have the system do this. I did the bulk of the work for me. Now go back and put it into terms that you're comfortable with or the things that you want to present out that are relevant. So it just is really just a big time saver on that front.
and this is one tailored use case of what you'll find with Rovo AI specifically in Atlassian is you have tailored agents that you leverage. So back to earlier on, Mark and Dave were talking about how some of the potential pitfalls or things to avoid is if you have a bot or a AI agent that there's no expectation around what it can do, and you just sort of, hey, just go ask it everything and it could do everything. That's not a good approach, really. So instead, having a, hey, this is the AI agent that helps you triage service issues. This is the AI agent that helps with understanding reporting and pulling back, like, hey, how do we do against SLAs? So you have a lot of capabilities there that you could leverage with how Rovo is set up and how you can build and leverage these AI agents.
And then last of what we're presenting on this area, but definitely not least, is the knowledge management components. And this is around you want to keep your data up to date and valid, make sure that the requests and the help that your employee systems are asking for is there, and then provide this continuous improvement concept. So what we're seeing here is this is a screenshot of a report that shows here's the known knowledge gaps, essentially what things people are asking for in this system that we don't have responses. So that's an important thing for adoption is we'll get into it, but it's like, you got to start somewhere, and you want to start with like things that are either high volume or high impact or both. And then you kind of do the long tail aspect, right? You work your way down to the smaller, more discrete things after that. But at first, you're tackling like what are the big gaps that things are people asking for. Let's create knowledge articles for those. In this case, it can actually create a draft version for you. After it suggests what the topic potentially could be, it could create that draft, and then someone goes in, approves it, and then publishes, makes any changes, approves it, then publishes it. The bottom area here is tracking your stats on how good this process is running and how things are matching compared to like what you have in the system. And I'm not going to get into terrible detail on these because I understand we have 5 minutes left here, but there's some crazy cool use cases that you can pull together, right? And these are just 4 random examples, not totally random. There are 4 examples that I see utilized often in the service management world. And I, grouped them up. You got kind of like the IT side of the house, and then maybe like the enterprise service network side of the house here. And essentially, like the use cases are you've got this concept of a major incident, right? Or a crisis situation. And you want to have the system, and it can detect, group, prioritize, and route these incidents in real time, right? And then after that, it can go manage that process as you're going through it, like with the Ops Genie, get people on call, start the bridge, do the health checks, coordinate all that effort, log all that effort. So there's an audit trail, find out what the root cause is, get it resolved, and then create that post-incident review automatically. You've got this concept where you can piece together things to create a really intelligent knowledge base, like growth engine, as I'm calling it. So it's a self-optimizing knowledge base that really just evolves real time. We covered it, but using the capabilities of detecting gaps, drafting articles from the resolved issues, proactively, surfacing the relative content before they even submit requests to employees. These are capabilities that we piece together to support that type of use case. And then we expand out into probably arguably one of the most visible things that an employee goes through, at least at the initiation of their job or their life at your company, is onboarding, right? So it's creating this like onboarding concierge service where employees actually feel like they're a part of the process, like it's not just happening to them. And you're ensuring that all the steps that they need to take place, like especially from like a compliance, maybe risk, all the HR training perspectives, that gets done, and then lets their hiring manager interact with them and be able to be reminded of the certain tasks or steps that need to occur, right? So you get all the right provisioning happening, the right training that's lined up and tracked, and you get the right resources available for all these new hires. And then one thing I see often is people think of service management just like an IT space or whatnot. HR is starting to be pretty popular with it as well, but there's so many other uh, like service centers, if you will, that you have. And I used to call them like shadow IT is the term. Now there's like shadow service networks that I see out there. One of them, these are departments like public relations or research and development or legal or, name it, finance, where they have issues with the finance. They're not tracking something, they actually have a problem with it. There's like a problem with a report or whatnot. Those types of service centers, in this case, facilities workplace request automation. I need a badge, I need a desk, I need equipment. It provides an easy way, same thing, using these same technologies to be able to route, triage, respond to all their questions that they may have. In the follow-up, we'll have like much more detail on those use cases if you're interested, but I wanted to do a quick leave behind here of some of the things that we consider, when deploying ITSM that I suggest is you don't deploy just the technology, right? It's like be informed, be purposeful about it. I would measure success not just in cost savings, but also like in faster service, fewer delays, employee experience, higher trust in the system. Those things are important. And the reason we really, picked JSM as our partner, to be fair, we could have, partnered with, there's other technologies out there. I just didn't think they did as good of a job. JSM and Atlassian, they're grounded in reality, as I say. It's very practical. The use cases are put out there, are intentional, and they're effective. So it makes our job much easier. I still think there's a learning curve, that needs to happen. We can help enterprises or corporations or any size company really, deploy and scale these things out. Like, there's a methodology that's helpful that when you're doing this, that I think is all appropriate, right? And this is why we came into being as flight crew consultants here. And what we offer, just so you're aware, is more of the advisory side of the house as well as like deployment services here. And with that, I'm going to do just super fast. We can send this out to everyone after the fact because I'm cutting it short. But we're publishing out the papers around this. So I've already published out the cutting through the noise. We covered some of the topics in part two. That will be published next week. And then I got a part three coming out, which is around business blockers, differentiation and risk, and like strategies to deploy more specifically. And then we're going to have some other content going up there around conveying the value of service management internally so you can help sell it internally to yourself, to your leaders and whatnot. And then also how to go about successfully like evaluating the service management tools. And with that, Dave, I was just going to leave it up here with the one last minute for any resources or last minute questions.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for your time. Like I said, this will be recorded so you can review any parts of it. We'll also be chunking it up and putting it online in separate sections. But the key takeaway here, right, is that this is the beginning, not the end. So we have plenty of resources to help assist with both understanding what the use case is to understanding how to effectively move forward with what those use cases are that make sense for your organization. Number of different tools in that regard in terms of assessments and architecture reviews. So bottom line, we've done this a lot over the years. We've right-sized our tools to help customers understand how to move forward and how to understand how to move forward effectively. So you can see us online. You can also email us directly. Either way, looking forward to talking with you when the time is right. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.